this video is a bit of a personal indulgence, as I'm curious as to what pace my super shoes actually benefit me. Am I better off wearing carbon shoes in certain races, or is it in every race? For example, if I'm running a slow marathon at the end of an Ironman, should I really just wear my cushioned training shoes? What about fast-paced training runs? And actually my half marathon PB is from wearing my training shoes. But it's not just me in this video. We've obviously got James, and we're also going to be bringing back Phil.
Yeah, I've got a slightly different angle to Heather because I'm not that interested in my own different paces. I'm more interested in people with different paces. Do they need carbon shoes? Do slower people need carbon shoes, or is it only the elites that need them? Well, let's head to the lab and find out.
This has all been inspired by these new shoes. Yes, at last, we have got our hands on the Cloudboom Echo 3, the shoes that the pros have been wearing for a little while. But the problem being, the only times I've worn them have basically been doing GTN videos when my legs are rather tired, or at the end of a triathlon, and yeah, the fatigue is already there. And that's got me wondering if when I'm running that slowly, are they giving me benefit, or am I actually better off running in my cushioned training shoes?
Well, while Heather's interested in what speed her carbon run shoes are good for, I'm more interested in, are they good for everybody? Are they good for someone who's Heather's speed versus someone who's running at my speed versus someone who's running at Phil's speed? Do we all get the same benefit? Or is that benefit reserved for those elite runners running under 3 minutes a K? Heather's starting things off in her training shoe, which is the Cloud Monster. She uses this for most of her easy runs and some of her quality work too. It's a maximalist shoe with decent cushioning and decent energy return. 6mm drop, 230 grams. So we're going to see how economical she is in this. Starting at her easy pace, which is about 5:10 per kilometer, then picking it up to her marathon pace, which is about 4:15 per kilometer, and then we're really going to crank it up to a 5K PB pace of around 3:35 per kilometer. And then of course, we'll put her into the Cloudboom Echo 3s, the carbon super shoe, and see how much more economical those are.
First up, I'm just glad that's over. It was much harder. I had to do a little bit of adaptation, which we'll talk about when we look at the results. But on feel, on the steady distances, and we feel that much difference, just slightly more warmed up on my second run, which could sway towards the super shoes or the carbon shoes. But by the end, that final, that running at that pace, felt like it didn't take quite so long. So that's a good, in my mind, good estimation of feel. And that is what I would expect at the top end pace. But yeah, I'm really intrigued to see the numbers. And now it is Phil's time, and you probably recognise Phil from our video when he went for a 5K PB in 8 weeks. So we know how fast Phil can run, and we thought, well, perfect, because his paces are slightly different to mine and James, so we could get the full spectrum. Now, Phil tends to run in the Cloud Monster, just like me, so that has been the shoe he's done for his test run, and now he's on his second test, and he's actually running with the Cloudboom Echo 3, just like the three of us. Now, Phil's paces, his easy pace or predicted marathon pace is 6 minutes 30 per K. Then at the moment, he's currently running at 5 minutes 30 per K, so his half marathon pace. And in a moment, he'll be heading up to 4:30 per K for his 5K pace. Well, Phil, you've got your breath back. How did the carbon shoes feel compared to your monsters?
Yeah, it's good. I felt that they kind of were propelling me forward with my foot stride. So a little easier than the my normal running shoes. Yeah.
Right. Did you feel like that you were breathing less, or that just what felt easier?
I felt like kind of on the front of my foot, sort of running with the treadmill rather than slightly more flat-footed. So yeah, it felt easier that I was breathing a little bit easier because I kind of felt like I was on my toes a little bit more, pushing forward.
And was that the same at all 3 paces?
Definitely the last one, maybe the middle one, but definitely the faster one. Felt there's definitely a difference in that one.
Okay. Well, we'll have to wait and see, and we'll let you know when we get the numbers.
Awesome.
But thank you for coming and being a guinea pig today.
My pleasure.
All right, my turn. I'm here comparing the Cloud Runners as my everyday shoe to the Cloud Boom Echo 3, same as the other two, at slightly faster paces than Phil or Heather went. Hopefully I haven't been too ambitious with my paces. I guess we're about to find out. All right, we are back in the set and we are going to crunch some of the numbers. Jonathan has done some of the legwork for us on this and given us some of the results, and they are interesting, probably not as scientific as we should probably have done. We'll get to that in a minute. But firstly, respiratory exchange ratio, which is the ratio of oxygen to carbon dioxide, across the board for all three of us, for all 3 speeds, was lower with the super shoes. They do save you oxygen, essentially. Now, that's not exactly running economy. It is definitely a lower oxygen cost, or you are more towards the fat burning end of the spectrum. But that was universal for all of us, for all different paces. Jonathan has then gone on and converted it into running economy in milliliters per kg per kilometer. So basically our oxygen cost per kilometer versus per kg. And that makes for it more interesting reading.
Yeah, so we'll look at Phil's first as the runner that went first and slightly slower. Now, his results show very negligible difference, basically. So there's a really small benefit that he does get from the super shoes, but I mean, I guess if you were Phil, you might be having to weigh up the cost of that and whether it's worth getting them. So yeah, I guess he's running at a slightly slower pace. He's heavier than some runners might be, but he wouldn't be getting as much advantage as an elite runner would be.
Yeah, that makes complete sense, doesn't it? I mean, it's the same amount of foam essentially for Phil as it is for Heather.
His feet are a bit bigger.
Yeah, well, but the stack height is limited, so it's the same amount of foam, and he's not going to get as much advantage. However, Heather, significant advantage, particularly as her speed increases. So her running economy got better and better the faster she was running, which I guess you would expect for a lighter, faster runner like Heather. Essentially, the shoes are better the faster she's going, which was kind of the question that Heather wanted answered, was, do I get much advantage if I'm running at a slow marathon pace for an Ironman, or should I just wear my normal training shoes? And the answer is, you do get a bit of an advantage. You're going to have a lower oxygen cost, but not that much. And you may want to weigh that up with the cost of these super shoes. You may be better off in your training shoe that's more durable for those longer, slower runs, and then obviously the shorter, faster. When you get down to the short 5K, you're definitely looking at the super shoe advantage. Yeah,
I mean, I like that psychology as well of sort of, if I'm running fast, I feel like I need a faster shoe, and if I'm not, and also comfort comes into it. I don't necessarily feel, because I don't wear them so much, and then you can keep them and preserve them longer because they cost a lot and we know they wear out. So I was quite happy with my personal results.
But you are still more economical even if you're going for a long, slow marathon slog. So you do still have to make that decision every time you go out the door.
Well, next time I plan one, I will look back at these numbers. But then, James, yours were less straightforward than Phil and I. So you had some skewed data, which I think you're going to talk about in a moment. But obviously, like you said, overall, the RER was lower across the board for you. But your economy was bizarrely only better at the middle speed. So I know you've gone back and forth to Jonathan just to try to get to the bottom of that.
Yeah, we discussed it a little bit, and probably the answer is more testing is required. As we said, we didn't do the most scientific test. We obviously have very limited lab time to film in the lab with Jonathan, so we kind of crammed them on top of each other. We did all the speeds in one shoe and then all the speeds in the other shoe with not that long a gap in between those two. And that may have skewed my data a little bit. That's obviously the order effect. So obviously I'd done the really hard run in the normal shoes before I even did the easy run in the super shoes, which has probably led to a little bit of a mismatched or inaccurate data when I started. Same for Heather and same for Phil, but I was probably a little bit more optimistic than them in my choice of my fastest speed and maybe strained myself a little bit more than I possibly should have. And yeah, paid the price for that. I was still perhaps recovering from some oxygen depletion when I was doing the easy run in the super shoes. There is also another possibility, which Jonathan mentioned, and that is familiarity with the shoes. Now, I've done a fair amount of running in those carbon shoes, but almost all of it around the 4 minute per kilometer mark, which maybe I was much more economical at, whereas the slower speed I was not more economical at, and the faster speed I wasn't, but I've done pretty much no running at those speeds. So there's a possibility that I was fighting the shoes, as it were, like I was expecting it to be somewhere and it wasn't there, and then I was correcting and overcorrecting. Same with the high speed. I was expecting to land, maybe landing a little bit earlier than I thought I was because of the higher stack out, etc. And I was fighting the shoes, and that led to lower economy. So we're not really looking too much at my data, to be honest. I would like to get back in there and test it again, but the reality is they were still lower oxygen consumption than the normal shoes across the board.
And it might sort of show that maybe you need to do a bit more training in them as well, which could be interesting. I also have to admit, and I don't know if you would have spotted it on the graph, but I ended up capping my top speed a little bit because I'm not quite as fit as I thought I was, and my 5k pace was a bit too fast. So that's maybe why I didn't get quite so much of a lactic build-up as you did, because I was like, well, that's a bit too hard at this time of year. But
she was equally optimistic and a little bit smarter when it came to the actual execution is possibly the answer there. Okay, so our conclusion, super shoes are faster. Always, for everyone, even for Phil, even at low speeds. They are faster, they are going to give you better oxygen consumption, lower oxygen consumption, but the gains are marginal for a lot of people and for a lot of speeds, and it's really only the faster runners at the shorter speed, shorter distances, so the higher speeds, that really are going to see the most advantage from these shoes. And you really have to weigh up whether a 250 pound price tag is worth a very small gain for your longer, slower running.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. All you have to do is go and watch a major marathon, don't you? And you'll see people at all speeds choosing all sorts of shoes, and you'll see guys at the front end not necessarily wearing super shoes as well. So it was an interesting, sort of bit of research. And for me, just personally, I was like, oh, I'm glad it's sort of proven what I felt, and I wasn't sure if that was correct. So it's left it a bit more open, but hopefully you guys have found it interesting. We've just tried to be really transparent with what we found, and hopefully there's some little snippets you can take from that. So if you have enjoyed it, just give us a like. We'd love your support.
Yeah, Jonathan and I discussed for hours, and we could have discussed for many more, and we could test for hours too, because there's so many factors. This super shoe thing, well, it's going to run and run.